We know the 2019 defense to be one of the best defenses that we have seen in recent memory, going all the way back to the Harbaugh era. The 2019 defense helped the San Francisco 49ers get to a 13-3 record and led them away from minutes from a Super Bowl victory. But can the 2023 defense be better than this 2019 defense? We're going to compare and contrast, talk about the differences in the rosters, where players that were in that 2019 season, how they've matured and progressed up until this point, and if the 2023 roster can take over the 2019 defense. We're going to get into it all right now. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see it. What is going down, Sourdough Squad? Welcome in on this Tuesday. More 49ers talk per usual. But before we get into our main topic today, breaking down the defenses, comparing and contrasting, look at the rosters, trying to make sense of how good this 2023 defense might actually be, we had a little merch drop today. Shout out to SDS. We see you checking in the chat. We had a little merch drop today, so I figured I would share it with you all in case you want to get on some of this hype train. We dropped some Talanoa Hufanga merch today. We dropped the Pick City merch. You see it right there. We have all different kinds of stuff, hoodies, shirts, stickers, all of it. So you get some Pick City merch if you're into that kind of stuff. But we also got Pixel Huff, a little bit of pixel action. If you want to get a little bit of a pixelated Talanoa Hufanga, get geared up and get ready for training camp. Get ready for the season because, hey, we're talking about defense today. Talanoa Hufanga, all pro, first team, Pro Bowler in his first full year as a starter. And he is going to be one of the main talking points when it comes to discussing this topic that we're talking about today. Because, again, you compare and contrast, especially with the safeties. You look at Talanoa Hufanga, Gibson, likely Odom, and guys like Jair Brown, and you compare them to the safeties in 2019. Kwaski, you had Jimmy Ward. Who else did we have? We had Tarvarius Moore. If you remember, Tarvarius Moore was actually starting week 1 for the San Francisco 49ers at safety. It really didn't last that long, but we're going to be comparing and contrasting all that type of stuff, and we're going to be getting into it all and discussing who we think actually going to be better. Is it going to be the 2019 team, or is it going to be the 2023 defense? All that good stuff. But again, dropping some summer merch, getting into all that good stuff. If you guys do want to tap in on some of that, I do have a promo code if you are interested to get you a little bit of a discount on your gear. And of course, we have the new Talanoa Hufanga drops. We've got all different colors, shapes, and sizes for anything that you are looking for. Great job with the images, totally working well. Fantastic. We also got the Pick City drop, as you can see. Let's get out of here. We got Pick City. You could get your F Dallas since we got Dallas again on the docket. We got the BCB, all that good stuff. We got the Brock merch. We got All Pro Fred. So we're getting that merch. We're getting the merch geared up. And I know you guys have been waiting for some SDS merch for a while. We're going to get that loaded up before the season too. We're going to get all the good stuff. If you guys do want to get some of this good stuff, you can go to the link in the bio. It's an ugly looking link, but there you go. Link. And also, if you use promo code early gang, you can get 10% off your whole order today. So, hey, there you go. All right, let's get into some business though. Even though we just did some business, let's do more business. The business of the San Francisco 49ers, the defense that the 49ers will be trotting out, and comparing it to the 2023 to the 2019 rosters, what we think it's going to look like. Um, when you look at grades, for example, if we're talking like PFF grades, and you just want to kind of get a view from that perspective, the 2019 defense for the San Francisco 49ers was the second ranked defense in the NFL with the 89.7 grade. The team that was ahead of them was the Pittsburgh Steelers with a 91 grade overall. But if you compare and contrast that to last year's defense for the San Francisco 49ers, the 49ers were third last year in overall defense. So you could also, and you look at, if we're looking at last year's team and you're looking at who they lost and who they've gained, they've lost Jimmy Ward out of the slot, right? But they were able to replace Jimmy Ward with Isaiah Oliver, who actually might fit this scheme a little bit better that Steve Wilks will be implementing. He's a bigger bodied slot. They're going to be blitzing him off the edge from what it sounds like. They're going to be using his physical tools and traits to be able to be playing around the line of scrimmage and being able to stuff the run and things like that. Now, back in 2019, Jimmy Ward was playing single high. He was playing in two deep sets. So Jimmy Ward from last year to 2019, just completely different roles. Now, Jimmy was still a guy that you could use all over the field, right? We would see, I think back in 2019, I think back to that Rams game at the LA Coliseum where the 49ers had two consecutive fourth downs, basically to kind of clinch the game. They needed to stop the Rams from driving downfield, and Jimmy Ward made a tackle behind the line of scrimmage coming off the edge, and then he broke up a pass to Cooper Kupp. So Jimmy Ward was used kind of all over the field in 2019, but more predominantly as a safety, whereas 2022 he was a slot. They kicked him down to slot because Gibson, as we know, took over that spot for the San Francisco 49ers and did a pretty darn good job. And speaking of Jimmy Ward was the second highest ranked player or graded player in 2019 with a 83 grade, only behind Eric Armstead. And that's pretty solid for Jimmy Ward. And then if you look at Jimmy Ward, and these are run defense grades, by the way. So in run defense, he was second in 2019, and then Jimmy Ward was first in overall run grade with a 91.4 in 2022. So the 49ers definitely going to be missing Jimmy Ward. But also with Jimmy Ward, it is going to be interesting to see how Isaiah Oliver fills that gap. And it does sound like Isaiah Oliver can do that. But let's take a look. I want to show you what I'm looking at. I got too many screens over here. Let's see. If we look at my big screen to my right, Let me get the whole screen over here. So I have team grades for 2019. 2019 is on the left. We've got 2022 on the right. These are overall defensive grades. I could probably make these a little bigger so we could see. So you could see Richard Sherman at the top of the list. We know Sherm. Sherm was a huge asset for the San Francisco 49ers. One of the reasons why he was always graded so high week in and week out was partly because no one ever targeted Richard Sherman. Do you guys remember that? Because you had that guy on that side, no one ever, like, yes, he was targeted, but the guys that got most of the smoke were your Emmanuel Mosley's undrafted free agent out of Tennessee, your Akello Witherspoon, former third round draft pick. Those are the guys that got a lot of smoke. K'Wan Williams playing out of the slot. So Richard Sherman, though, I mean, you can see how many snaps he played. He played a lot of snaps. But the compare and contrast here, right, is Charvarius Ward stepping in kind of that Richard Sherman role. You had Diamador Lenore talking about it. I think he went on to the 49ers Talk podcast with Mayoko and talked about how he's looking forward to being targeted more because you do have Charvarius on the other side. You got Don't worry. Don't worry. I'll get you some merch with my face on it. That's in the works. I might drop that next week. So stay tuned. I'm gonna try to do a lot more merch drops. So pay attention to those as we get out. And I know you guys have been you've been asking for the SDS merch for like over a year now. And I just been sitting on it. But I'm gonna get that stuff out. And hey, the people want to wear my face. I got you. I got you. You guys know I got that on lock. But anyways, it is going to be interesting when you look at the cornerback position like as a whole, right? Richard Sherman. Let's see if we can kind of drill it down a little bit. So if we go to the cornerbacks, Emmanuel Mosley, DJ Reed, Akello Witherspoon, K'Wan Williams, Dante Johnson, Jason Verrett. Jason Verrett only played like he played like 2 snaps against the Pittsburgh Steelers and went on IR after that. So we didn't see a whole lot of him. Of course, 9 Lives, Dante Johnson. Still on the roster last year, but didn't play a whole lot. He was hurt for a good portion of the year. But we lose E-Man. Obviously, E-Man from 2019 as a rookie to this particular point was much different. But as we know, he got hurt. So Diamador had to step up. Charvarius Ward turned into one of the best cornerbacks in the league, in my opinion. And I think he's going to improve. I really do think Charvarius is only going to get better. And we could see him play closer to that Richard Sherman type caliber 2019 season. I mean, you look at the snaps that these guys had, you look at their grades. Where Charvarius thrives is in the run game. He is one of the highest graded cornerbacks when it comes to run defense. It's one of the reasons why he's such a good fit for what the San Francisco 49ers are trying to do, because he plays a physical brand of football from the cornerback position. So obviously we're looking at 2019 compared to 2022, but going into 2023, our likely starters are going to be Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, Isaiah Oliver at cornerbacks. And you compare those guys to Richard Sherman, K'Wan Williams and a combination of Emmanuel Mosley and Ahkello Witherspoon, it feels pretty even. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're really looking at the guys who played the predominant number of snaps, and again, we're looking at the projection of what the 2023 starters are going to look like. K'Wan Williams, right, was like 5'9". He's a dog though, or a shark, as his nickname was given to him because he was always around the football and always making plays. K'Wan Williams was one of the most underrated slot corners in the NFL when he's with the San Francisco 49ers. But you also look at what Isaiah Oliver is going to bring to the table. They go up in size there, and I think they get a more physical. I mean, I want to say more physical because K'Wan was pretty darn physical. So I think they get a similar style slot corner, just bigger bodied, and who will be a little bit better suited. I mean, K'Wan, they brought K'Wan off the edge all the time. So I think they are going to be very similar in that regard and how they were used and the effectiveness in which they had. And then obviously Richard Sherman versus Charvarius Ward. Obviously, Sherm was at the kind of tail end of his career. He was still had that little prime window, I think, in 2019. And the 49ers definitely took advantage of the last great years of Richard Sherman. But I think the counter to that is Charvarius Ward is still improving. He's still getting better. And I still believe last year, kind of after getting the payday, coming over to the San Francisco 49ers as the number one, I think he's only going to continue to develop further. So I'm really excited about Charvarius Ward. I do think 2019 Richard Sherman versus 2023 Charvarius Ward are going to stack pretty evenly when it's all said and done. I think we'll be able to compare and contrast those 2 years, and obviously looking into the future, but we'll be able to be like, all right, Charvarius Ward has arrived. I really do believe that Charvarius Ward is kind of sitting right outside that top 10 range in the NFL for cornerbacks. I believe that Charvarius Ward, if he comes out and, we get some of those turnovers because we anticipate the 49ers defensive line is going to create a ton of pressure. And as a result of creating a ton of pressure, quarterbacks are going to be forced to get the ball out faster. And it is going to give the cornerbacks more leeway to be able to jump routes, jump throws, bait, do all those different types of things. And I really do think Charvarius Ward could be on the like a big beneficiary of that added pressure. And we could see his numbers finally be considered as one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. My bold take for this year is that Charvarius Ward will become the best cornerback in the NFL. It's a pretty bold take, but if he comes away with 6, 7 interceptions based on some of the pressures that I think will be generated from the defensive line, Charvarius Ward could be a first team all pro potentially. And when you add in what he does in the run game, I think sky's the limit for Charvarius Ward. And if Diamador Lenore can provide adequate coverage, which I think he also can, and will also take a step forward heading into year 3, and definitely some added confidence, I do think this tandem, and with Isaiah Oliver and Samuel Womack in the slot, they'll be able to do some work. So you also take a look again at the safeties: Talanoa Hufanga, Gibson, Jair Brown, and George Odom, compared to some other guys like uh, we talked about him earlier, Jimmy Ward, Kowalski, Jimmy Ward, Kwaski. We had Tarvarius Moore. Who else? Marcel Harris. I forgot about that. We had Exum. I forgot he didn't play a whole lot, but Marcel Harris played a decent amount, and that was actually the year I think before they switched Harris to linebacker. I think was that 2021 they switched Harris to linebacker. I think that was 2021. But I'm going to go ahead and say that I actually think that the safeties heading into next season are actually going to be better than what we had in 2019. To me, Tarvarius Moore turned into a liability in coverage. There's nothing more apparent than that week 1 game against Tampa Bay. I remember the clip like it was yesterday. You have Tarvarius Moore, eyes locked in the backfield. He's playing there in too high. And you have I think it was a Kello passing off Mike Evans because they're playing like either a variation of cover 2 or cover 3. And you have basically Mike Evans running a go route up the left sideline, and you see Kello pointing to Tarvarius like, this is your guy. And Tarvarius was locked in on the just locked in on the quarterback. And thankfully, that was actually Nick Bosa's first career sack. But if it wasn't, Jameis Winston was trying to get the ball to Mike Evans, would have been like a 60-yard touchdown. But Tarvarius Moore, I don't think he was. He had the physical tools. Tarvarius, I don't think, had the processing that you needed from the defensive side of it. So I never thought Tarvarius was all that great. And he never really, as a 3rd round pick, he never really developed at all. So your main safeties were really Tartt and Jimmy Ward, and obviously Gibson proved he came. Gibson had 5 interceptions last year, right? Gibson came in and proved to be a big surprise. George Odom is an all-pro special teamer who has some potential upside in that ability to play more defensive snaps if needed. And then, of course, Talanoa Hufanga was able to come in, had a really hot start at the beginning of the year. Definitely kind of cooled off a little bit at the end. I do think Talanoa Hufanga will get right, and he'll be able to improve from year 1 and year 2 to year 3. Jesse says I was at that game in Tampa. Man, what a game that was. We had Jimmy Garoppolo pick 6 in that game. What else did we have? We had a Richie James touchdown in that Tampa Bay game. I just remember it not being the prettiest game, but the San Francisco 49ers were able to squeak it out somehow. What else happened in that game? Again, that was Nick Bosa's first career sack. We didn't even know if Nick Bosa was going to play that game because Nick Bosa had an ankle injury all training camp, barely participated. But that was the game where we really got to see, maybe this transition right into the defensive line. So anyways, to wrap up the secondary, I do actually think by adding Jair Brown, Talanoa Hufanga heading into year 3 after the year he just had, and I think Talanoa will take another step in his development. The senior leadership of Gibson, Jair Brown coming in. The 49ers have some solid depth behind them. They'll probably be on the practice squad with guys like Taylor Hawkins, Quantrez Knight. Those guys are pretty solid, but they'll probably be practice squad guys that could be elevated for special teams roles. But I do think the safety and cornerback group in 2023 has the potential to overtake the team in 2019. So that's a good sign for the San Francisco 49ers defense moving into next year. So I'm really excited about that. Actually, let's go to the linebackers next because we still had pretty much the same linebacking core last year as we did in 2019 for the most part, right? If you guys remember, we did have Quan Alexander. Quan Alexander was the leader of that linebacking core, if you don't recall. Um, and Quan was really the heartbeat of that group. And that was rookie year Fred Warner, right? Or was Fred Warner 2018? I think Fred Warner was 2018. Yeah, he was drafted in 2018. So it was second year Fred Warner. It was the first year that we got number 54, right? Remember, he changed from number 48. So it was second year Fred Warner. And this is where we really, really saw Fred Warner start to blossom. And I think this is when the 49ers realized that Quan was expandable. They ended up trading Quan Alexander the next year. Um, so uh let's see. But we do look at Aziz Al-Shaair, Dre Greenlaw. Obviously, Aziz won't be on the team this year, but we still have Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner. Greenlaw was a fifth round pick rookie at this time. He made a lot of plays that year still. If you remember, he had the big interception against the Seahawks in the regular season. Their first meeting picked off Russ, and then, of course, the goal line stop that Greenlaw had to send the 49ers to the 1 seed, I believe it was, in the playoffs. And probably one of the more iconic plays in Kyle Shanahan era. I mean, that goal line stop by Dre Greenlaw, I'll never forget that moment. It's one of those moments as a fan that's just burned into my brain, where I was, how I felt, the anxiety levels, the whole situation with the the Seattle Seahawks having beast mode, trotting beast mode onto the field on the 1 and being like, this is how it ends. Where the 49ers are going to die at the hands of Marshawn Lynch. They're actually going to run it from the 1. Then the Seattle Seahawks get a penalty, and the penalty knocks back the Seattle Seahawks. I think it was a false start on the offensive line. So I think it knocked them back to the 6, and then they were forced to throw. I really do believe that if they ran that ball from the 1 with Marshawn Lynch, Marshawn was still plowing, man. And it would have made up for that whole Super Bowl situation. I just felt like, my gosh, they're really going to give it to Marshawn on the 1 and they're going to win. Thank goodness that penalty happened. It changed the play call. They were forced to throw to the tight end. Dre Greenlaw got him. And boy, talk about anxiety. That whole sequence was just pure anxiety. But just like Brian is talking about, you now have Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner are still going to be your top 2 linebackers heading into 2023, but they are in their prime. Fred Warner is the best linebacker in the NFL. In 2019, Quan, I think, was still considered the better linebacker. I really do think even then Quan was playing at a little bit higher of a level one of the things that derailed Quan was he had the pec tear, I believe, if you remember. So, but Quan was still considered the better linebacker in 2019. Um, but Fred now and Dre Greenlaw now, you go from second year Fred and rookie Dre to now LB1, and Dre Greenlaw is definitely a top 10 linebacker in this league. You have the number 1 and another top 10 off-ball linebacker as your two starting linebackers heading into next year. So, uh, I mean, we're talking Bowman Willis level, I think. Like, we're not talking Fred Warner, Quan back in 2019. If we're really comparing the linebacking core, well, we're going all the way back to 2012. We're going back to 2013. We're talking, can Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw rise to that level of Willis Bowman? And in today's NFL, because when you look at Bowman Willis and you look at Greenlaw Warner, they're totally, I mean, Willis can play in any era. I don't think that matters at all. But when you look at the combination of each one of them, they were so just naturally fitted to their era. With Willis and Bowman, it was still run heavy, smash mouth, jumbo sets. The passing game, that was when RG3 and Cap were just drafted, and the college offenses were finally starting to trickle into the NFL. Back then, Willis and Bowman I mean, were prototypes for that era. Heading into 2023, you can make the case 100% for Fred Warner, but you can also make the case for Dre Greenlaw that they are prototypical linebackers of this era of predominantly passing first offenses, big armed quarterbacks, spread, uh, you know, all you have these, elite tight ends, pass catching tight ends, elite pass catchers out of the backfield. It really does change the complexion of how the game is played. So 100%, I think the linebacking core heading into 2023 is better than it was in 2019. And you add Oren Burks, you lose Azeez Al-Shaair, who could have been a starter. That sucks, right? That sucks. Losing Azeez, that's going to be interesting. But however, I do personally have a ton of faith in Oren Burks to step in and play and fill in that role as we need it. He might not be the same, I think he's a tier below where Azeez was, but that tier that Oren is still in, he can be a starter. I'm probably higher on Burks more so than many, but I feel extremely confident with Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, Oren Burks as your top 3. And then if we're talking DFF, Marcelino McCrary Ball, D Winters, Jalen Graham, whoever actually makes the roster, I think the 49ers linebacking core holistically is probably deeper. Elijah Lee, I didn't think he was all that great. Mark, I always messed up his name. In Yoka, and his German last name, I believe. He was a special teamer. He was a good special teamer, but Oren is better than him in my opinion. Oren is, Dre Greenlaw was LB3 at that time. Rookie Dre might have just a little edge on Oren just because of the traits that he had, but Azeez was nowhere near what he was as he's leaving us. So I still think this linebacking core heading into next year is going to be better than what it was in 2019. And then if we look at the defensive line, The defensive line was the bread and butter for the 2019 team to go as far as they did. I really believe that. Again, I loved what the secondary brought to the table. Again, Richard Sherman. But I really felt like they were just scared to throw at Richard Sherman. They were just scared to throw his way. And right now it feels like this defensive line, as it's currently constructed, it's deeper, I think, for sure, than 2019. Now we can make the case about it being top heavy because this is where we're going to have to compare and contrast. You're getting Nick Bosa off Defensive Player of the Year. So Nick Bosa, reigning Defensive Player of the Year, versus rookie Nick Bosa, who barely participated in training camp because he had a injured ankle for the pretty much all offseason. Bosa went into his rookie campaign hurt. He still dominated. He still played exceptionally well. How many sacks did we get from Nicky? Sacks here in this column. We still got 14 sacks from a rookie Nick Bosa. 102 total tackles, 20 quarterback hits, 68 quarterback hurries from I believe he won Defensive Rookie of the Year as well, if I'm not mistaken. I believe so. I think so. And then you look, he had 19 sacks, 31 quarterback hurries, 31 quarterback hits, 48 quarterback hurries. But you can see this number was higher. The quarterback hurries, I really think that those hurries had a lot to do with Dee Ford. I really do. And that's nothing to take away from Nick Bosa and what he provided as a rookie. But a healthy Dee Ford was special. He was special, man. Dee Ford, when he was locked in and ready to go, he was so fast off the line of scrimmage. So you guys can't see. Is it better if I go like this? I know it's a lot of information. Let me see if I can zoom it in a little bit. It's as high as I can go. But you had rookie rookie Nick Bosa. You had Eric Armstead, who played a lot on the edge, and Eric Armstead had 13 sacks. I think people forget how good of a season that Eric Armstead had, and he played a lot of those snaps in this particular year. Surprisingly enough, came from the outside. He played a lot on the edge. So Eric Armstead, they moved him all over the place. Of course, you have DeForest Buckner, game changer. Earl Mitchell, decent playing guy. Sheldon Day played a lot. DJ Jones played a lot. But really, the main, you had some Ronald Blair action. Solomon Thomas played a lot. But it was really the top guys, man. It was Nick Bosa, Eric Armstead, Dee Ford, and DeForest Buckner. That defensive line, in my opinion, was one of the main reasons why that 49ers team won as many games as they did. Really, you can really drill it down to those four guys. Obviously, the depth behind them as well. But when you look at how those guys affected games, they were game wreckers. that defensive line was some things of legends. And what I think the 49ers have an opportunity to do is they can get back to being close to that this year. Now, the biggest key factor here is what they're going to get on the outside across from Nick Bosa, because they don't have right now a D Ford. They don't have that pure elite speed, elite get off coming off the opposite side of Nick Bosa. So, but DeForest Buckner, handshake emoji, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, obviously much. I mean, you've seen some of the photos of Eric Armstead. He looks lean. He looks like a guy who's ready to get after the quarterback. He still has that size that you can play inside, but he looks lean. He looks like he's trimmed off all the fat, and he is looking, well, he's like 6'7", like 295, 300 pounds. Eric Armstead, I think we'll see a lot more kind of flip-flopping him to the edge, to the inside. You have Javon Hargrave as your anchor in your DeForest Buckner role. You kind of get back to getting Eric in that mode where you can just move him like a chess piece. And then obviously Nick Bosa. It's going to be interesting to see what we get out of guys like Cleveland Ferrell, what we get out of guys like Drake Jackson. Drake Jackson has an opportunity to have a big year, but obviously Drake is bulking. So with Drake bulking, he feels like he could be playing a hybrid role as well, as like he feels like he could be in that Charles Omenihu role, rushing from the interior. Maybe you have Drake Jackson rushing over the guard, and maybe you have Eric Armstead on the edge. And it's Eric Armstead, Javon, Drake Jackson, Nick Bosa in your kind of NASCAR package. But they can play with that. They can move those guys all over the place. So I do think that the 2019 defensive line is slightly better, but I do think the 2023 has an opportunity to challenge for that 2019 spot. And so when you look at the defense as a whole, I mean, you had Robert Saleh as your defensive coordinator. You now have Steve Wilks, who's going to bring more to the secondary, I believe. You still have Chris Kosurik. He's, I mean, as solidified as can be as a defensive line coach in this league. Johnny Holland still coaching linebackers. You still have a lot of continuity on that defensive staff. You look at all the levels. I still think secondary. I think secondary if we go safeties is going to be better in 2023 than the 2019 team. So I think safeties 2023 check. I'm going to give it to them. They're going to be better than the 2019 safeties. Cornerbacks, I'm going to say I'm going to give it a draw. Actually, I'm going to do it and then you do it. So I say the 2023 safeties are going to be better than the 2019 safeties. What say you? You drop a 2019 if you think the 2019 team's better. Drop a 2023 if you think the safeties will be better in 2023. Pretty self-explanatory. But give you guys an opportunity to get your input in after listening to me go on and on about all this. Fear says 2019. Patabo says wash. Bubbly says 23. How about them Niners 23, 23, 23, 23, 23. Far as safety, 23. 2019 Gibson was cut by the Bears. I didn't know that. Is that when he went over to Jacksonville, I believe? I don't know. I don't know Gibson's career all that well. Tommy says Sherman was a leader on that D, so I say 2019. Very true. Sherman was a phenomenal leader. Absolutely phenomenal leader. But Gibson, from everything that we've heard, is a phenomenal leader. Fred Warner is now the leader on that defense. Fred Warner is a leader for the entire locker room. Fred Warner, I think, is at Sherman's level in regards to leadership. I think Eric Armstead is kind of at that level from a leadership standpoint. I mean, you talk to these guys on the defensive line. I talked to Kinlaw. I talked to Omenihu. They look at Eric as that cornerstone leader for that defensive line. So, yes, Sherm was the 2019 leader, but when you look at 2023, they also have a ton of leaders as well, and the guys that have matured from 2019. But anyways, we're on the safeties right now. We're on the safeties right now. So, I believe it's 2023. We had a couple 2019s. We had a wash for safeties. The cornerback ones is going to be interesting. So, what would you have? Who would you rank better out of the cornerback spot? The 2019 cornerbacks or the 2023 cornerbacks? Again, it's Ward heading to second year as the cornerback one for the 49ers. Demo heading into his first year as a full-time starter, but got spot start duty last year, similarly to the way Emmanuel Mosley rose to prominence as a starter. You have K'Wan Williams in the slot versus Isaiah Oliver, Samuel Womack in the slot. You have some decent depth pieces. I think it all really comes down to how you view Richard Sherman in 2019 versus how you view Charvarius Ward in 2023. I think that is where if be I think that's where it could weight it down, because I do think K1 was really good, but we've heard a lot of really good things about Isaiah Oliver, and they seem to have a very defined plan. So there's a bit of an unknown with the 49ers, right? We don't really know how Isaiah Oliver is going to fit until we actually see it. So we're kind of projecting out, but it's really close. I really do think it's really close. Let's see what the chat's saying. I think Tommy's talking about. I think he's talking about cornerbacks for 2023. Says it's a wash for corners. 2019 corners, Sherman over Ward. So again, how do you weight these two guys? If you pick Sherman over Ward, that might swing. That might just be the swing. He says Lenore equals Witherspoon. I'm actually going to say Lenore is going to be better than Witherspoon at this point. So I'd have greater than Lenore. He says K1 over Oliver for now. Needs to see what Oliver brings. I agree with that. Brian says cornerbacks, I say 23, 19, but could be a wash. Feel like 19 cornerbacks were only that good because of a great D line. I mean, you go back to 2012, right? Terrell Brown. You go back to Carlos Rogers, Tremaine Brock, Chris Culliver. Those guys were pretty good, but they had a really good defensive line. It's amazing how much a good defensive line can help your secondary. So, but you can say the same thing about the 2023 corners as well. It's an argument that works for both sides. 23 I'm gonna assume that's a wash. 23 cornerbacks will be good because of great D line. Exactly. Cornerbacks 2019, safety 2023. All right, thank you for the clarification. Cornerbacks DB have Wilkes now as DC. That'll help. See, there's all these little factors. So the reason why I would pick 2023 is because I think Charvarius Ward is going to take another step. And because what Charvarius Ward also offers in the run game, I also think Demo is going to improve. But there is a question mark on Isaiah Oliver. I do like Samuel Womack, and I like what he brings to the table. But it is so. I would have to say right now, it's probably equal. I'd probably say it's a wash. I know it's not a hot take, but really, you compare and contrast all the little nuances to it, I'd have to call it a wash, man. I really think I'd have to call it a wash. Um, and even right now, just because I know what the 2019 team did, if you had to make me pick one, I would probably pick 2019 just because I know what 2019 is. I know what Sherman did. I know what E-Man did. I know what K1 did. That would be the difference for me, is that I know. I don't know what 2023 brings. So because of that, if I had to pick and I couldn't sit on the fence, probably pick 2019 just because I know what they did. There's still some variables in heading into 2023, but I think they could be better. But it's a TBD with that. It's a TBD. So because it's a TBD, and I'm trying to look at it from a million different angles, I'd probably go, if I had to pick, probably go 2019. But the margin is like paper thin margins for how I'm picking that route. Paper thin. If I could pick it the way I want to, I'd call it a wash. But but I don't want to call everything a wash. I want to pick one. So I'm picking 2019. See, these hypotheticals shouldn't be that hard. They shouldn't be that hard. You notice I have a hard time with hypotheticals. Like, I love the hypotheticals, but when it comes to like making a definitive decision on it, I'm like, "Ugh." I can see it. I think that's part of the ADHD problem, is you can see things from so many different angles and so many different outcomes, and there's so many different variables. You're just like, I can see so many circumstances where the 2023 team's better. Anyways, let's move on. We'll recap it. So for the linebackers, right on time. Right on time. So for the linebackers, again, we had pretty much prime Quan Alexander before he tore his pec. We had year 2 Fred Warner, rookie Dre Greenlaw. I think Aziz Al-Shaair was a rookie as well. Mark Nziocha, I always mess his name up, but he was a key special teamer. And then you compare that to this next year's crop, which is going to be prime Fred Warner, prime Dre Greenlaw. You could make the case it's prime for Oren Burks. I think Oren Burks, this is going to be his prime of his career, and he has an opportunity to get a lot of snaps. But you also have DFF, you also have D Winters, you also have Jalen Graham, and you also have Marcelino McCrary Ball. I think it is almost in a landslide. The 2023 has the better linebacking core, because I mean, we're talking about certified best linebacker in the NFL in Fred Warner, and top 10, arguably top 8 arguably top 5 linebacker in Trey Greenlaw. Like there is a scenario where we end 2023 and Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw are considered literally 1 and 2 in the entire NFL. That can happen. Fred's already at 1. Dre Greenlaw's already in top 10 consideration. If Dre Greenlaw comes out and duplicates the year he had last year, I would say just duplicates it. It would be 1-2. 1-2. So I'm taking 2023 linebackers over the 2019 linebackers in an absolute landslide. Absolute landslide. Justin says Marcelino McCrary Ball might take that next step and be the third guy. 100%. I really think the main competition for Oren is Marcelino. I love DFF, friend of the channel. We've had him on the show. I think DFF is perfect special teamer. Obviously, he also plays well when he gets his opportunities. But I think because Marcelino is younger, I think they may want to see what Marcelino has. And we've seen how effective Marcelino can be in training camp, in preseason. We never got to see him in regular season action. If you've seen Marcelino, dude is jacked. That guy doesn't skip gym days at all. He looks ready to go. So I agree with that. I think if there's anyone who's truly going to challenge Oren for LB3 snaps, it's going to be Marcelino. And that can, dude, the linebacking competition is going to be nuts. It's going to be crazy in training camp. I'm getting anxiety thinking about like who's going to make the roster because they're probably going to keep 5 linebackers. And out of those 5, who makes it? Who gets the cut? And don't forget a guy that I never talk about, like ever talk about. Curtis Robinson made the actual final 53-man roster last year. He made the cut, which was the craziest thing to me because he made the cut. And then they instantly put him on injured reserve, which obviously they felt that he would have been swooped up by someone else, which that would have been shocking to me. Maybe they tried to trade him, and so they knew that there was interest out there. That's the only way I can quantify why they kept Curtis Robinson on the active to then immediately put him on to IR is because I assume they tried to trade him or they shopped him, and there was interest, but they just never came to terms with anyone. That's that's the only thing that I can think of why they felt Curtis Robinson needed to make the roster, then to put him on IR because that ate up a return designation for Hassan Ridgeway. They had to make a decision at the end of the year who was coming back from IR. They needed a guy like Hassan Ridgeway to come back, but they had used too many IR. It was an interesting roster situation that ended up biting them in the butt at the end of the year. So I think they're higher on obviously Curtis Robinson than I think the fan base is, but that's another name to keep into the mix. Appreciate the super chat, Justin. He says, curious to know if Graham or Winters makes the team. Could you see a possible LB trade? I feel like they gotta keep Winters. Obviously, if Winters proves that he belongs in the NFL at minimum, they because of the draft compensation they gave up to get him and the upside that he has, I think you keep Winters. Graham has an opportunity to push on someone. Graham feels like a guy who can push on DFF a little bit. I don't know if Graham's going to necessarily push on Marcelino. I feel like Marcelino's competing with Oren. Like, this is how I'm quantifying it. I don't know. I'll only know once I get into training camp. But I feel like Marcelino's competing with Oren. Obviously, DFF is a special teamer. He can go anywhere and really compete with any one of these guys. But D Winters, Jalen Graham, I think they're competing with DFF for that special teams role. They are pushing on him. Yeah, God, I feel like Marcelino would make the roster. I don't know. I was shocked that they didn't keep Marcelino last year. I was shocked they didn't keep Marcelino last year. They kept Curtis over Marcelino. Um, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of how I look at it. Warren Burks in competition with Marcelino, Curtis Robinson, potentially D Winters. But I really think maybe the rookies are challenging for that DFF spot. DFF, I love DFF. He was, I think, third in the NFL in special teams tackles, tied with Oren actually. But they can get younger, which again the unfortunate nature of the business. But they can get younger at that spot, maybe a little cheaper, a little bit more upside. So, dude, it's. I really think it's Fred Warner, Drake Greenlaw, Oren Burks as your primary special teamer, and has 1 foot in the LB3 spot. But it is really going to be it's really going to be interesting. So we'll see how that goes. And do I see a trade coming? Absolutely. For sure. Grab a couple late round picks. Uh seventh, conditional sevens to just get something for one of these guys. I could definitely see that for sure. I've already made the roster. If you haven't noticed, I should just get a Graham jersey just because we share the same phenomenal last name, um, and all that stuff. So I think last on the list is defensive line. Defensive line. We went through safeties, corners, linebackers, and we are left with defensive line. This is a hard one because that 2019 defensive line was special. It was really good. And but this 2023 defensive line has a potential to be special as well. So I mean, it's close, man. I mean, obviously you got Bosa versus Bosa, but it's what is it? Defensive rookie of the year Bosa versus defensive player of the year Bosa. You basically have Javon and DeForest Buckner in the same role with the same potential skill set. You have Eric Armstead, who Eric had a breakout year in 2019. And I think he has another potential breakout year ahead of him. Because of the addition of Javon Hargrave. And I think the real X factor here is you don't have D Ford. I think that's the big X factor. Is you don't have D. You don't have that guaranteed burst off the edge, that guaranteed first step quickness, that guaranteed pure pass rusher. I think that's the main thing holding it back. I think obviously you can make the case Bosa this year's but better than Bosa, rookie Bosa. I can make the case that I think Eric Armstead could have a very similar year or better to what he had in 2019. I think you can make the case that Jay Vaughn and DeForest could have very similar years. It really comes down to that edge to me. It really comes down to Cleveland, Drake Jackson, those guys opposed to D Ford. So I like the depth. I mean, depth on both 2019 teams, DJ Jones, Sheldon Day, Kentavious Street in some instances, Ronald Blair. But I do like Kevin Givens. I do like T.Y. McGill. I think Javon Kinlaw has an opportunity to stay healthy this year. Cleveland's going to be interesting to see how I think Cleveland has a chance I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to break out, but I think Cleveland could have his best year of his career. Kind of similar to what we've seen from guys like Arden Key, Omenihu, Samson Ebukam. I think this is a spot where a guy like Earl is going to have a resurgence. Maybe not to the level in which he was drafted ahead of guys like Brian Burns. I mean, typical Raiders, right? How could the Raiders? And I liked Cleveland a lot. I was a big fan of his. But the reason why Cleveland for me was nowhere near Brian Burns's range is just because Cleveland didn't have that natural speed off the edge. He was a great big end. Like he was good base down type end. He didn't have that twitch that I want off the edge. But doesn't mean the 49ers can't use him. So I think because of the D Ford situation and what D Ford gave, that is what is going to be the difference in 2019 versus 2023. So I'm probably going to go 2019. So when you look at each position group, though, because we picked safeties in 2023, it was basically a wash for cornerbacks, landslide victory for the linebackers, and probably 2019 defensive line is going to get the nod. But now you put all those together. You even look at the coaching if you want to, Sala versus Wilkes. You still have a lot of the continuity of some of the coaches that were on the staff in 2019 that are still here in 2023. Kosarek, Holland. Now the question becomes, which defense do you think is better? The 2019 49ers defense, or do you think the 2023 49ers defense will be able to overtake what the 49ers did in 2019? Drop it in the chat. I want to see what you guys got. I want to see who's got some spicy takes. I want to see. Drop it in the chat. Once you drop it in the chat, smash that like button. So far, Fear saying 2019's better. Bubbly says 23 will be better. 23 will be better. 2023 has a chance to be the best Niner D ever. Don't forget that last year in real time, we were comparing. There was a point when I said the 2022 defense is better than what the 2019 team did. Remember that? Like, that's how good they were last year. That we were saying, man, we might not even have to compare them to 2019. We might have to go back to 2011, 2012. That's how good they played last year. So they have an opportunity to take a step forward with what they did last year. Obviously, they lost Jimmy Ward, they lost Aziz Al-Shaair, they lost Omenihu, they lost Ebukam, but they add Javon. Demo steps up. It's going to be close. Callie says 2019 secondary is weak and no depth compared to 2023. We had the cornerbacks as a wash. We had the safeties definitely winning that comparison. 2023 defense linebackers and playmaking safeties put them over the top. 2019 defense was shut down. I mean, you're not disagreeing with that. 2012 was crazy. Aloha Smitty says, I think the 23 defense will be better. The D-line will surprise everyone. I do think that as well. I do think we're going to be surprised by guys like Cleveland Farrell. I do think we are. 2023. Prisoner of the moment, fair. DN depth, still a question mark. But again, I think it's because we aren't wrapping our heads around what Cleveland could be. Now, I don't think Cleveland is going to be a 10-plus sack guy. I don't think he will be that. But I think he could present pretty good depth. Better than I think we're anticipating. And then also on top of that, I think Drake Jackson has the potential to really step up. So, I mean, Drake Jackson had 3.5 sacks last year. And he did that in limited action, and he had some opportunistic sacks. But I think with so much attention going to Javon, Eric, and Bosa, that fourth guy on the line of scrimmage is going to have some opportunities. So whether that's Cleveland, whether that's Drake, whether that's someone else that we're not talking about. I see people talking about Spencer Wagee. He's definitely a dark horse. He's definitely a dark horse to make the roster. We haven't talked about Robert Beal. The 49ers drafted Robert Beal in the 5th round. Can he be the D Ford speed rusher that we're looking for? Got some questions, got some unknowns, but I mean, when you're talking about overall defensive rankings, 2019 better, 2023 better, it's close. It's dang close. It is really, really close. And you know what I really, again, this is almost the same argument that I had for the D-line that I think is tipping it one way or the other. Who is going to be the D Ford? If the 49ers can find their version of D Ford, I don't care if it's a poor man's D Ford, just something on the other side of Nick Bosa. If they can get that type of impact on the edge, on the opposite side of Bosa, whoever it is, that will be the difference, I think, in really pushing this 2023 team ahead. I do think this 2023 team has potential to be a really good defense, definitely be better than 2019, and be in the conversation for 2012, right? But who's going to be that guy? Who's going to be that guy? Who's going to step up? Who's going to put pressure on the backside while they're sliding protection towards Bosa? They're double teaming Javon. They're chipping, they're having to send their running backs, to handle A gap pressure. Who's coming off? Who's going to be the guy coming off the other side? So there's potential for guys, but we just don't know yet. So where that's the problem with going up against what you actually know versus what you don't know. And but there's 100% potential that we're sitting here mid-season, 3 quarters in, and we're like, yeah, this defense better for sure. That's a good spot to be in because I believe that defense was a huge reason why the San Francisco 49ers went 13-3. And that was with Jimmy Garoppolo coming off ACL surgery, his first first season starting. Jimmy Garoppolo had 4 good games. He wasn't bad in the other ones. He wasn't great either. He wasn't the reason why they were winning. He played a part in why they were winning. He held his own, but again, it was mid-range quarterback play from Jimmy Garoppolo in 2019, and they went 13-3. That's why I understand why people are constantly talking about the quarterback. I get it. But just look at what the 49ers have done in the past. They didn't have an elite quarterback. Now, yes, they fell short of the ultimate prize, but there are some weird, crazy circumstances that led to them not getting there and crossing that finish line. So the chance was there. It was right in front of them. They thought they had it. You talk to any of them, they were celebrating. They thought they had the Super Bowl one. But then Mahomes happened. Well, you don't have to go down that path. But they almost had it with a mid-range quarterback. Like the definition of mid-range. So if this defense can be as good as better, if the skill positions insulated around whoever quarterback it is, there's no reason why this team can't win almost all their games. So I think the defense is going to be fantastic. I'm really looking forward to it. I think there's going to be a bit of more coverage emphasis to be added on top of the layers of pass rush ability. But I think it's going to be a good spot. And maybe that's a good segue. Maybe we'll compare 2019 offense versus 2023 offense. Because again, if we're coming away from 2023 defense versus 2019 defense, and it's like, man, it could really go either way. I mean, there's definitely a range of outcome where 2023 is one of the better defenses we've seen in the last decade. And last year's defense, we were talking about them being as one of the best defenses we'd seen in the past decade. There's still a lot of potential. Don't let that quarterback conversation beat you down. Appreciate all you guys for tapping in. As always, y'all the best. I really do appreciate you guys tapping in. And again, as always, engaging with all the content during the off season. You know, it's the slow period and all that good stuff. So I appreciate everyone tapping in. Again, if you missed it earlier, we dropped some Talanoa Hufanga merch. I dropped a link in the bio of my YouTube channel. If you want to take a look at that, we got two versions. We got Pixel Hufanga dropped, and we got Pick 6 Hufanga dropped. Like I said, you can find that on my bio on Instagram, on YouTube. Also, too, if you use promo code EARLYGANG, you'll get 10% off site-wide. So tap in and smash that like button on your way out. And apparently, y'all want my face on a shirt, so I might have to make that happen. Keep a lookout for this ginger beard, this thing on a shirt maybe coming up. Appreciate all you guys as always. You guys already know the drill. Get your cookies on the way out. Smash that like button. Shout out to Gang. Shout out to SDS. Appreciate you guys. We'll be back tomorrow. And we'll get into it. Maybe we got to keep it going. 2019 offense versus 2023 offense. And we can see who comes out on top. Appreciate you guys as always. I'm out of here. Peace. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Love to see it.